Okay, let's get underway. Let me begin by saying good evening, everyone, and welcome to this County of Brant official plan virtual town hall session. And thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I know there's a lot of things that compete for your time and your attention and your interest in your communities, in the vibrancy, the ongoing success of your community, of the county as a whole, is greatly appreciated. Some of you have heard me say this before, and I think it bears repeating. I do a fair bit of this kind of work, and it's my personal belief that people who, like yourselves, who take time out of your busy personal and professional lives to contribute constructively to matters of civic and societal interest are always most deserving of our gratitude and respect. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward, as I'm sure do you, to a productive and constructive session. Now, for those of you whom I've not yet met, or those who may have forgotten me, my name is Glenn Pache. I'm the head of a firm called GLPI, and it's my pleasure to serve as the independent facilitator for the meeting. So again, it might be important for you to know that I am not a County of Brant employee, nor am I an employee of any of the planning or engineering consultants retained to work on the new official plan, or the OP for short. My role is simply to facilitate the session, and the only bias I bring to the meeting, if I can call it a bias, is toward achieving the best result for us all, and that's what I will set out to do. Now, some of you may be wondering how many folks we have online at the moment. We've currently got about 25, 30 attendees. Hopefully we'll have a few more join us. I know some are also watching through the live feed on Facebook, but right now within the sort of Zoom house, if you will, the virtual Zoom house, we've got about 27, 28 people, just to let you know that. Now, I'll introduce a few other people in a couple of minutes, but let's talk a bit about what it is that we are up to tonight. You'll hear more about this later, but really simply put, the County of Brant has created a draft new version of the new official plan with a view to ensuring that it meets the needs of the community both today and for years to come. And the draft also ensures that the official plan is aligned with provincial policies and that it updates the framework for future land use in the county. Now, the OP initiative is addressing a variety of themes and topic areas, and you'll hear more about these later, but it's things like building healthy and complete communities, and managing growth and development, and protecting what we value, and furthering economic development and prosperity, and transportation and mobility, and so forth. And tonight we're focused on sharing some key policies and directions outlined in the draft of the new official plan. Now, by the way, the county has information on all of these topics, which is available on the county's website. So if you haven't checked it out already, I encourage you to do so. The long address is www.brant.ca/new official plan. And again, I encourage you to go there if you have not already done so. The website also includes various mechanisms for sharing your views on a variety of topics, and we'll talk more about those a little bit later as well. Now, we have a number of objectives for the meeting tonight, and they're reflected in the session agenda, which is as follows, and we'll put it on screen now. It's slide 2. We're obviously in the opening remarks component. In a moment, I'll provide a bit of information about how you can participate in tonight's online meeting, and I'll cover a few housekeeping items. I'll then invite Mayor David Bailey to share some opening observations and additional context. I'll also introduce some of the key team members that you'll be hearing from this evening. We'll then hear from a number of County of Brant staff who will share a presentation on the official plan initiative. And this is going to include a whole bunch of things, but as a sample for you, it'll cover a project update and, of course, notable highlights of the draft new official plan. You'll hear about the alignment of the draft new OP with strategic priorities. You'll get a description of some of the initiatives and policy directions in support of the types of themes and topic areas that I mentioned earlier. And again, that'll cover things like growth management and planning for infrastructure and so forth. And we'll hear about future forecasts and their implications, and we'll hear about some of the challenges and the opportunities and trade-offs that need to be addressed as part of this initiative. At the end of the presentation segment, we'll be addressing questions of fact or clarification on our topic. And County of Brant staff will address as many questions as there is time for this evening. We will also outline the range of opportunities available to you outside of this session for providing additional comments, ideas, other questions, and of course, we'll talk about next steps. Now, the county is looking to stimulate an informed discussion about a number of issues, and they're certainly very interested in getting community perspectives. The county recognizes the importance of understanding different points of view and harnessing the best ideas from wherever they may come. I'll also note that some people sent questions in advance of the meeting, and our speakers will try to address many of them during the presentation, or we'll deal with them towards the latter part of the meeting. And again, I'll put some of those forward on people's behalf. Please note that the team is not, again, I want to repeat that, the team is not addressing individual property or site-specific items this evening. Those are best dealt with, those very particular and specific questions are best dealt with through other forums. So really simply put, tonight is about updating everyone on the OP initiative, including its current status. It's about sharing highlights from the draft version of the new OP, including policy directions and tools in support of a variety of themes and topic areas. It's about providing an opportunity to participate in the process by asking questions, and we'll certainly outline other avenues for sharing comments. And again, we'll talk to next steps and where things go from here. So before I go on, and I know some of you are experts in Zoom, you've been using the platform many times over the last 18 months, but for others, you may be new to it. So let me very quickly, and we'll put this up in the next slide, let me talk a little bit about this session. First of all, you probably saw the flashing icon that this is being recorded. The session is being recorded so that the content can be made available post-session to those who might have been unable to join us this evening, and also, of course, to have a record of the proceedings. Now, again, for those who have not used Zoom, I'll briefly describe the functionality of this webinar. As an attendee in the webinar, you cannot be seen or heard by us or anyone else that is participating. We will occasionally be using real-time polling questions, and we invite you to respond, and we'll be doing that throughout the webinar. We will also invite you to send any questions you might have by using the live Q&A icon on the panel at the bottom of your device. This is your primary way to engage with us during this virtual town hall. Again, during this Zoom session, questions can be submitted by using the written Q&A function, and the image on screen will help you find that function depending on the type of device that you are using. For those who may not have the capability to use the Zoom Q&A function, questions can also be sent to the Brant Official Plan email address, which is, and I'll repeat it twice, officialplan@brant.ca. So again, that's officialplan@brant.ca. So again, there are two ways to share your questions: through the Zoom Q&A, the written Zoom Q&A, and through email to officialplan@brant.ca. And our moderators will be monitoring both of those and they will be queuing the questions that will be put to our responder panel during the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have any technical issues, and I think this was on the previous slide, write to us using the Q&A icon or email gary.porter@brant.ca, because we recognize maybe one of your issues is you're having trouble with the Q&A. In that case, do email gary.porter@brant.ca, and a technical professional will try to assist you. And by the way, you can adjust the size of the presentation screen and your speaker screen by hovering over, toggling over the line. You'll see it pop up if you move your cursor over it, and you can slide the line one way or the other to increase the size of whatever you want to be larger. For those of you who have chosen to dial into the meeting, in other words, you are using a simple phone and not a computer or web-enabled device, you'll be able to listen to the presentation, but not share any questions unless, again, you have access to a separate, email. So in which case, again, you can send the questions to officialplan@brant.ca. But for those of you who are in the Zoom house, please do use the written Q&A. That's the most simple and easiest way, and we'll be monitoring that on a regular basis. Okay, so again, last time I'll say it, or maybe the second last time I'll say it, if you have questions about anything you're hearing in the presentation, or perhaps that's not in the presentation, but related to our topic area, please send them in through the Zoom Q&A or through that email, officialplan@brant.ca, as they occur to you. That's really important. Don't wait until the end of the presentation. Send your questions as they occur to you. Staff, again, will be monitoring them, and they'll be consolidating them and forwarding them to us to answer a little bit later. If due to time constraints, your question is not addressed this evening, please be assured that it will be considered by County of Brant staff, and it will be documented as part of this broader process. So I know we have a number of our esteemed elected officials joining us this evening, and the mayor may choose to single them out. I won't do that right now, but I will thank them for attending and for their interest in our topic. And just before I introduce the Brant staff, who are members of the project team and that you'll be hearing from this evening, I'll invite Mayor David Bailey to share some observations and additional context. Mayor Bailey, please go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and you're always the professional. Thank you for how well you do your job. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to know that you're in charge of the way the evening's going to roll out. Thank you to the staff for everything they've done. Jessica and Jennifer and Brandon, everyone has done such an amazing amount of work to get to this point. The official plan is such an important piece of how the county is going to look in the future. Not that it's not picture perfect now, but it's going to be even better and even brighter in the future with these kinds of people making decisions on what should be and what has to be and what can't be for the County of Brant. I don't know which councilors are here for sure. I know Councillor Pierce is here. I know Councillor Howes is here. And that's all I know for sure because I can't see anyone else's name. But I'm sure as many councilors as possible that could be here are here. So thank you to staff, because it's really, I'm not going to have another opportunity to thank you for this evening. It's an amazing how well, again, you do your job and how much confidence I have and our council has in the decisions that you've come up with the input from the community that we've gathered. So thank you all for doing what you do and doing it so well.
Thank you, Mayor Bailey, for your kind words and for the introductory remarks. Let me take a moment now, as promised, to introduce the staff team that you may be hearing from this evening, again, either as presenters of information or as potential responders to your questions. And I'll invite each of them to just say a quick hello so that you can put a face to the name, again, if you're watching through the Zoom platform or live streamed on Facebook. So I'll begin with Pam Dusling, who is the General Manager of Development Services. And Pam, I know you wanted to say more than just a few words. You wanted to say a couple of other things. So go ahead before I introduce the others.
Thanks, Glenn. I just wanted to give a big shout out to our policy planning team for all of their great work. This is such an important document, as Mayor Bailey said, for the County of Brant. And we can kind of start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we're nearing the end here, and we thank you for all your participation, because this is your plan. This is the County of Brant residents' plan. And thank you for attending tonight.
Thanks, Pam. And I know some of you are interested in how many attendees we have. We're up to about 35 now, and I'll try to keep you posted on a regular basis if the numbers change in any significant way. And again, that's 35 attendees in the Zoom meeting. There could very well be many others who are watching the live stream on Facebook. So thank you, Pam. Let me go next to Matt Vaughn, who is the Director of Planning. Matt, would you say a quick hello, please?
Yes, thanks, Glenn, and good evening, folks. Very excited to be part of this process, and another big shout out to our policy team. They have been working very hard on bringing this document to you, and this is another milestone along the way, and we're getting very close to having an amazing official plan that Brant can be very proud of. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. And you'll hear a lot more from our next speaker in a moment. This is Jennifer Boyer, who is the Manager of Policy Planning, and Jennifer is also the Project Manager for the OP. But a quick hello, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending tonight, and we'll look forward to the presentation and your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Michelle Schafel, who is an environmental planner. Michelle?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm the environmental planner for the county. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have Brandon Courtleave, who is a planner. Brandon?
Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to a good presentation and answering some good questions as well.
And we have Jessica Kitchen, who is also a planner.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to share phase 4 of the new draft official plan with you this evening. Thanks.
And last but not least, we have Nicole Campbell, who is an administrative assistant to the team. Nicole?
Hi, thank you.
Great, thank you. So given the time is of the essence, let's begin with that core context setting presentation. We'll then, get into some of the greater depth about the draft version of the new OP and some of the policy directions across the range of themes and topic areas that I identified earlier. You'll be hearing from various county planning staff, but we will begin with Jennifer Boyer, who will kick things off before handing things to her colleagues. And again, as a reminder, as questions occur to you, please send them in during the presentation. Don't hold off. Send them as they occur to you through the Zoom Q&A written function or by email to officialplan@brant.ca. So thank you, everybody. Welcome again to the meeting. Great to have you here. I'll invite Jennifer to start us off with the presentation.
Thanks very much, Glenn, and I appreciate everyone that's taken their time during the weekday to be here tonight, and thanks for those who are watching on Facebook as well. And also those who can't attend tonight, we post this on YouTube at a later date, and I know some people have said they can't attend tonight, but they'll watch on YouTube later as well. So for those who have been following along almost the last 2 years, it was November 2019 when we kicked off the official plan. I just want to do a quick synopsis of where we've been, and we have our timeline graphic at the bottom of the page. And as Jessica had mentioned, that we're already on phase 4, which is the draft official plan. And as we move ahead at quite a rapid pace, we've prepared a draft official plan, and that's where we're here tonight. We had a town hall in June, which some of you may have attended. And that was the policy directions. And we had a council meeting on June 10th, and that was to direct staff to prepare the draft OP. And then we went to council on July 29th with a draft OP, which was a very short period to prepare it. But we're here tonight to explain to the community and to answer some of your questions. And I've been in contact with a lot of you phone, and we try to get back to you in terms of receiving information and your requests. But I just wanted to give an overview of where we've been, just to see and look towards how we're moving forward to get to the plan to the province to finalize our official plan to meet conformity to the growth plan by July 1st, 2022. So if you go back, which is almost a year ago, in December, we had a growth forecasting scenario, which the province revised the growth plan for a reference forecast, and that's how the Place to Grow Act, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, indicated where the County of Brant will go in terms of their population, in terms of residents, and also the jobs that we are to provide to 2051. We then prepared a residential and community area land needs assessment study, which was in March. Then we did employment land needs, and we indicated we have a shortfall of employment lands and a surplus of residential housing lands moving forward to that time period. And then, as I indicated, we brought forward some preliminary policy directions, which isn't just about our land needs, and we presented in June everything from protecting what we value in terms of agriculture, natural heritage, water resources, and also how we want to grow our communities and how we want to formulate complete communities, and how we're dealing with transportation demand management, traffic issues, aligning with the transportation master plan, which is ongoing at the same time. So what's happened since then? You'll note that Glenn had mentioned that we have a website, and the submission that was prepared for July 29th and then August 10th is the draft official plan. And this document is the policy document that outlines all of the technical information that's been presented in the last 2 years and the community feedback. And with the preliminary policy directions, we also had prepared what we heard from the community, and a lot of this is reiterated into the plan along with the growth plan alignment. The other document is something called the Municipal Comprehensive Review, which is a 500-page compendium of all our land needs assessment, our housing strategy, our commercial land needs, and a housing availability study to determine what we need in terms of housing stock and employment lands to 2051, which was prepared by our consultant with our input. So that's where we are tonight. And as we say, we've had a lot of questions lately about, in terms of feedback in the next 90 days, the province has our submission, and we're still receiving a lot of feedback on site-specific reviews from the residents. We're also engaging Indigenous communities, businesses, and developers, so the next 3 months are very important. Next slide. And we've showed this a few times before, but it's very important to realize that Council has key strategic priorities in which the official plan is one in this term of Council. And you'll see number one, sustainable and managed growth is the number one key strategic priority for the county in this term of Council. There's many other plans, as I've mentioned, that align with this, including the Transportation Master Plan, class environmental assessment servicing studies, for Paris, Burford, Cairnsville, St. George that are going on as well. We also have other strategies that have been prepared. Last night, the age-friendly community plan went to policy committee, as well as an energy demand management study, which is part of our climate change initiatives. And all these are making a coordination effort with the new official plan as we align these key strategic priorities all together. To understand land management and moving forward in terms of planning and growth management for the county. Next slide. So just some key highlights of the official plan if you've had a chance to crack it open. And I know in terms of Council, they've heard this summary before, but I just wanted to make sure that the community members and some of the people watching tonight know that the new official plan has substantially changed since the last version in 2012. Mostly it's because of provincial policies and alignment to the growth plan, but we also have, in terms of the previous slide, our strategic priorities that we had to align with as well, which are very important to the community. One of the biggest key highlights is our Indigenous engagement and reconciliation policies. We've had some excellent discussions with Six Nations and Mississaugas. And in terms of the official plan, it really lays out an engagement strategy to ensure that we have reconciliation measures for the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation initiatives that the municipality is responsible for. In terms of the growth management strategy, as I've mentioned, this is a key priority in terms of slow and managed growth to the year 2051. We've heard this loud and clear from the community that slow and managed growth is the #1 priority, and that aligns with everything in terms of servicing availability, the traffic issues, ensuring that people have a wonderful place and a charming community, and the county retains that charming small town feel that we have right now to the planning horizon of 2051. The one thing though is we have to provide jobs at the same time. And part of our forecasting is to ensure that we have the land available to create jobs as well. And in terms of our serviced prestige lands, we don't have enough, and we'll talk about that in a minute as to what we're dealing with that issue. We have a new land use designation framework, which is very different than the past in terms of new community nodes and flexible policies to allow some complete communities framework, and also to ensure we meet housing policies and different types of housing as we have an aging demographic, and also our young people and your family members and youth need to have affordable and attainable housing as they want to, a lot of them, stay in this area. We also have enhanced protection for our agricultural, our environmental, and heritage buildings in the official plan, and laying out a proper implementation process to do so. And we also have our refined mapping that we've undertaken. And as I've mentioned, the transportation impacts and the way we're aligning with the transportation master plan. Next slide. So to summarize quickly, in terms of our growth management strategy, as I've mentioned, a key priority, as we've heard, is to slow and manage growth in the communities, not just in Paris, but a county-wide strategy as well. And this happens to deal with not just urban residential and new suburbs that are being developed, but it also has to do with other areas that are being developed outside in our agricultural areas as well. Part of the growth plan says that you have to direct growth to settlement areas away from agricultural lands and to protect the natural heritage system as well and away from natural hazards. And we believe this plan does lay out a proper framework to do that. We also have indicated that we're bringing forward a phasing of development plan, which will allow this growth to be managed along with servicing allocation for mostly specifically Paris and St. George for the future. We've also changed our density and intensification targets, which we've talked about in previous presentations and our presentations to council, and what that means in terms of allowing additional housing in terms of the county, in terms of the density and complete communities, and also what intensification means in the built-up area to allow additional units. We have a designated greenfield area that's outside of the built area in Paris and St. George, and those are usually the vacant lands that are slated for residential development in the future. And as I said, our land needs assessment indicated that we have a surplus of these lands, and the province is expecting us to apply the excess lands policy, which I'll describe in a minute. Next slide. So as I just mentioned, we have something called the excess lands policy, and the province has indicated that our surplus residential lands, as we're an outer ring municipality, triggers something in the growth plan called the excess lands. And basically what it says is that these lands are not to be developed into the plan horizon as they're surplus to the needs in our forecasting to the year 2051. And we're working with the province to determine how we do that, but we've written in our growth management strategy, basically what's in the growth plan, the direction of the province, that basically these lands will be prohibited to be developed in the plan horizon. And part of this is the growth management strategy. And so these are the things that we're working with to make sure that we have a proper way of slowing and managing growth. These excess lands, though, are not to be down designated. They're not going to lose their residential designation, and they will be reserved beyond the 2051 planning horizon. And we're not allowed to swap out designations, like you can't change it to agriculture but what they are is they're sterilized basically for development. Next slide. And as I've indicated, we have employment lands, and this was a very big topic from April into June and July in terms of ensuring that the county has the opportunities to ensure that we create jobs and have the availability of lands for employment opportunities in the county. We have many big businesses that are knocking on our doors, and we want to ensure that we are competitive in the Greater Golden Horseshoe as the growth plan lays out a strategic alignment for employment, goods movement, and also opportunities that create harmony within the municipalities around us. So part of this is actually two different ways of dealing with employment lands. The old OP just had one, just employment lands with policies attached to it, but now we've designated different facets of employment lands to enhance the area around the 403 corridor, which we've asked the province to be a provincially significant employment zone. General employment, we've actually allowed small businesses and also allowed various accommodation of employment uses that are more industrial or commercial in nature, and we've also allowed different mixed use areas, and also in terms of allowing general employment supportive uses in those areas, such as on arterial main streets that will allow for some restaurants, and like the Tim Hortons in Paris is actually on employment lands that support the areas around them and things like that. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, the county looked hard and we did an agricultural impact assessment and submitted it to the province in terms of where we were going to deal with our shortfall. And it was quite a debate at council to determine if this land around the 403 corridor was appropriate and where it was best to put the shortfall of employment lands, and if servicing would be available in the near future. You'll see on one of the official plan schedules, our land use schedules, that we've reserved lands around the 403 corridor for the future horizon to 2051. And it just doesn't include the two additional parcels of about 108 hectares we're adding at the north side of 403 and Powerline, but it also includes lands south of the 403 along Bethel Road, out to Pottruff Road, and south along the southwest corner of Pottruff and Bethel Road. These are strategic reserve lands that will be reserved up until the plan horizon if the need becomes available. And as we've indicated, we have many big businesses knocking on our door, so we wanted to ensure that the future is available for these lands and when servicing is available. Next slide. So just to reiterate, we've shown this figure many times in the last almost 2 years, but I just wanted to let you know that this has not changed in terms of the future forecast, as this is the reference forecast in terms of the county population forecasting. And basically for the county, we've also attached many documents with previous reports with all the growth allocations across the county. But the future forecast right now, we'll be curious to see the census results when they come in terms of what actually the county's exact population will be. But it's roughly right now about 41,000 people. And it's looking at about 59,000 as our forecast horizon to 2051. So that's the future forecast for the county that we presented, but just to remind you that basically in terms of growth and population, that's where we're at. Next slide. So one of the questions we've had a lot is about the future forecast, and you've heard a lot of council talk about where is the most growth going to happen, and do we have enough, and which is accounting to our residential land needs, is that the annual forecast is based on units approved through developments and applications that are submitted prior to 2020. And the growth that we're going to experience in the next 5 to 10 years comes from a development that's been approved over the last 10 years. So really it's a numbers game to determine how much we have now in the next 5 to 10 years, 15, 20, and then up to 30-year horizon. And if you've listened to the council presentations, there's a lot of concern that the next 10 years are very heavy in terms of the registered developments that are coming, mostly in Paris and then in St. George. But the one thing is with, say, building permits that are issued each year, and last year was one of our record-breaking building permit issuances in the entire county. Over 700 residential permits were issued. The one issue is that the forecasts are approximate and that the scenarios can fluctuate over time, as we've seen historically, and based on many different influencers, such as market demand, servicing capacity, and also in terms of servicing allocation availability, and also the approved development cycle. So if you look at the historic county residential permits, it's really a very cyclical graph, and the pandemic has changed somewhat in terms of the backlog, but the next 5 to 10 years, we do have a lot of draft approved subdivisions, but really it's a fluctuating market demand and in terms of what the county can actually allocate servicing to. We're going to have more information in the next couple of months on this when the county brings forward a servicing allocation and phasing of development. But we just wanted to let the public know that, you know, the next 10 years, definitely we have a lot, but we are very in tune to our forecasting scenario in terms of that growth mandate. The one thing, though, I need to say is that the building code and even the Planning Act does not limit the number of permits that can be applied for at any given time. And county staff have to be available in terms of determining how much allocation can be given each year. But infrastructure and servicing must be available to support those proposed developments. Next slide. So right now we're going to do a question based on all that information and everything that's been presented up to this and the draft OP. Do you think the new official plan will do enough to manage growth in terms of our growth management strategy moving forward? It's just a simple yes or no question. So go ahead. We'll just give it one more second while everyone gets in their polls. All right, so if you can see that the poll question, we actually have 61% said yes, but 39% said no. And then for those who said no, we'd like to hear why that you don't think the county's doing enough to manage growth. So we'd like to change that to try to get up to as much as possible to actually have a higher number, basically, to ensure that we are slowing and managing growth over the period. So thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to Brandon. He's going to present on complete communities, land use designation, and our settlement areas.
So as Jen mentioned, one of the key factors of this new official plan really is the phasing of our growth. It's important in order to phase our growth to create a clear settlement area hierarchy. So what we mean by that is that the province uses the term settlement area for things like cities or towns or villages, and it differentiates strictly between serviced urban areas and unserviced rural areas. So we've created a similar hierarchy that's going to work within our context in the County of Brant. So primary settlement areas like Paris and St. George, they're the ones where the municipal services exist, where the growth has been directed by the provincial policy framework. And then our secondary settlement areas like Burford, Canesville, Mount Pleasant, and the Oak Hill Airport area are the urban areas where the servicing might be a bit limited, might not exist yet. Many of those places are undergoing studies or master plans to consider the possibility for servicing within the horizon of the official plan. So they've received their own secondary settlement status under the new official plan. The remaining areas, so our rural settlements, our hamlets, our villages, are the smaller rural communities that are unlikely to receive municipal water and wastewater services within the horizon of this plan, so before 2051. This hierarchy that we've created will help us ensure what types of intensities of growth will be directed to these areas. outside of the 3 settlement types. For example, opportunities for severances, subdivisions, other types of development like that is going to be heavily restricted. And that's going to be a growth management tool that really helps us protect our farmland and our environmental features, and will be in line with the provincial policies as they are today. This also helps us focus on making sure the development that's happening within our settlements creates complete communities. So to include things like parks and open space, better roads and sidewalks, better housing options, but more concentration on a good design of those complete communities. So to create those complete communities, we've introduced a new land use designation framework for this new official plan. Another one of the big changes in the new official plan is this framework. And based on our engagement, we heard a desire for more flexibility with mixed uses, incorporating a higher quality of design, and better protection for things like heritage and public spaces. So our new urban and rural community systems will help us achieve the objectives. For example, we've combined the urban and suburban classifications so that we can focus on creating complete neighborhoods regardless of if they're located in an urban or rural area. We've added more flexibility by blending designations to promote a mix of uses. For example, you'll see that there's no specific residential or commercial designation with the new official plan, but instead the various designations will permit a variety of uses, and it will be heavily dependent on compatibility with their surroundings. So this will help us focus on creating vibrant mixed use areas. It'll provide a wider variety of living and working opportunities for our residents. And we'll also be able to use this new framework to create our comprehensive design manual. And that will be one of the big implementation tools that comes out of the new official plan. So that design manual is going to provide guidance based on our land use designations and the areas in which you find the buildings or construction projects. It's going to provide guidance on how to design things like our streets, complementary buildings, whether it be infill or a building going up beside a heritage building. And we're looking to not only protect that identity of our communities, that small town identity, but also enhance it. Within our land use designation framework, speaking of protection, we've also integrated some overlays. And so what these will do will help us manage growth and protect what we value. It sits on top of the designation, but then once the criteria has been fulfilled or the objectives have been fulfilled for that overlay, it would be removed and that land would then become available for development. So Jen talked about our strategic employment land reserve. That's an example of what we're doing with that. But we've also introduced a prime agricultural holding. So this overlay is going to be applied to areas that were designated for residential growth in some of the older official plans, whether it be the previous townships or within the current official plan or the one prior. And these are mostly found in secondary settlement areas, whereas we're not quite there yet, where we can offer full municipal water and wastewater services. There's a lot of studies kind of going on at the same time. So we want to make sure that we have a tool like this that means the land outside of the built up areas is going to remain as farmland for now, as rural land, until we know more about the growth needs of those communities and availability of the servicing. So similar to the provincial policies, infrastructure servicing and its availability really will be one of the key determinants for growth in our new policies. Infrastructure is also one of the topics we've heard the most about over the course of this project with all of our engagement. We've gotten questions about traffic, potential for a new bridge in Paris. We've gotten a few questions about that already tonight, and providing services to places like Burford or Cairnsville, adding a highway interchange at Bishopsgate and 403. So lots of big ticket items. The section of the draft official plan related to infrastructure, so section 8, provides some high level guidance to that respect. The policies of an official plan don't lay out exactly what infrastructure projects are needed. It's a much higher view of things. But what we can do is make sure that growth is only allowed when certain infrastructure criteria is met. So things like improving traffic and parking in Paris, making sure communities have more trail connections, a complete streets framework that regulates street design, speed, safety, all things that we need to be looking at as the county continues to grow, and those things have been included in this new official plan. The new growth management strategy forms part of our official plan, as Jen mentioned, and it's tied directly to that availability of infrastructure and services, and helps us control how much growth happens at one time. So if those services aren't available within a certain time frame, the development will be considered premature and won't be able to get started yet. So we're also working directly with the other county departments, like our operations folks, to make sure that these policies are reflected clearly in our future infrastructure and development projects for effective and efficient phasing of development in our settlements. So as Jen mentioned as well, it often takes many years for developments to go from the planning stage right through to development, sometimes even decades. And a lot of the growth we're seeing, especially in Paris, was approved 5, 10, 15 years ago. And some of these new policies won't necessarily apply to those developments because they're already going, they're in the pipeline, so to speak. But what we do have are tools that we're creating to help with things like design. So our future design guidelines, our zoning bylaw, those types of things will apply to some of these newer developments, and will be able to help us kind of guide those in the right direction as well. And as we know, with new development comes an increase in population, and that increase means that more people want to get to the county, get out of the county, get around the county. And we've heard from residents that they really want improvements to our traffic and parking situations, especially in Paris. More options to get around the county as well. That was another big one. So our new official plan is directly coordinating with our ongoing transportation master plan project. These desires of our residents are being accounted for in both of those projects, and you'll see some more details as the transportation master plan unfolds further. We'll be looking at things like improving traffic and parking, adding active transportation and low-speed mobility routes, creating complete streets framework to make sure the construction of our streets reflects the needs of the county. So the road right-of-way is public space after all. So residents want to have more of a say in the design of our transportation corridors, including things like walkability, so the widths of sidewalks, the connections, traffic calming, biking and walking trails. And these are all things that residents have said they value. And while the OP doesn't directly talk to those things, it does set up a high-level policy framework for us to put those things into place at later dates. So before we move on to the next topic, we will have another quick poll. So we are going to be talking quickly about environmental features and natural areas. That's one of the next topics that we'll be talking about, the protecting what we value. And if you have had a chance to crack open the new OP or read the summary, we'd be curious to see what you think, if there's enough protection available for environmental features and natural areas with the new official plan. So we'll give a couple seconds and see what folks are thinking. But we're hoping that we've heard what you have said, what the residents have said. They really want us to go above and beyond the minimum requirements and push our way into having those requirements above the minimum for environmental features. So I'll give a couple more seconds here. All right, so it looks like there were 17 of you that answered, so that's great, thank you. And it looks like 76%, so 13 of you said yes, that you think the new official plan is going to do enough. And then there were 4 of you, or 24%, that said no. So that's great, that's good information to know. And those are definitely some things that we're working on. We see the value of environmental features and natural areas in the county of Brant, and the value for our identity as well. So with that, I'll pass it over. I think Jen is taking over for me, so I'll pass it back to Jen.
Thanks very much, Brandon. On behalf of Michelle, I'll be presenting these slides tonight, and we're available for questions as well. So as Brandon said, and thank you very much for answering that poll, that's very good to hear, because this is also one of the loud and clear messages we heard from the public and the community, not just about growth, because it's not just about our towns, it's also about our countryside and our rural areas, and protecting what we value was one of the #1 things that we heard. in terms of our water resources, our drinking water, our agricultural prime ag lands, and our natural environment, our wood lots. And also talking to Indigenous communities, these were also one of their #1 concerns, especially drinking water out of the Grand River, which Six Nations draws their drinking water from, including the city of Brantford as well, and also the Grand River itself. The Grand River is a heritage river. It's one of the most important tourism features of the county of Brant, and it's very important that we work with adjoining municipalities in terms of protecting the Grand. It's really the lifeblood that flows through our community. But one of the #1 things we heard is actually protection of the agricultural system. And as Brandon mentioned before, in terms of our land use settlement hierarchy and our land use designations, the province has actually laid out some fairly strict rules in terms of prime ag and the protection of prime agricultural lands. In terms of new uses, we're really primarily limiting agricultural uses and agricultural related uses, on-farm diversification, which we have new policies for to support businesses, recreation tourism, and also our mineral aggregates, which are outside of our settlement areas. But really it's to direct other land uses, including lot creation, which is directed to settlement areas. We're not allowing as many rural residential lots, and I know that there's been a lot of site-specific reviews and requests that have come into the county for new rural residential lots. And unfortunately, we have not been able to entertain those, because really if it's in a prime ag area, that designation has not changed, and we've actually got very stringent policies on that the province has directed us to. It'll be very interesting the comments we get back from Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs to see if we've actually gone far enough with our policies. It'll be interesting. And also in terms of our natural heritage system, we have brand new mapping that's really been refined to really define what's in our natural heritage system. We've got woodlands and wetlands and valley lands, many other features. Our water resource systems, very important to the county. And really it's permanent protection and limited lot creation in these areas. And we also have to have, in terms of corridor enhancement and linkage features, to ensure our wildlife and our water resources are protected. Part of that's from a guide, which is actually a federally initiative called How Much Habitat is Enough? It actually talks about how much habitat is enough to sustain our natural systems. And Michelle's written in some incredible policies in our plan outlining that, which will really help us going forward. Also, in terms of protecting what we value, especially Indigenous communities, we're very concerned with our archaeological and cultural resources, and also our heritage buildings, and how we can protect those moving forward. And that's also part of our small town charm, and also protecting these very important historical pieces of cultural and archaeological protection. The County of Brant is littered with archaeological sites that are very important. And part of that will be cultural heritage assessments, and the county will be writing in conjunction with Six Nations and Mississaugas of the Credit an archaeological management plan, which will really help us sort of engage and also build relationships in terms of protecting those resources. Slide. And also, as mentioned, what we really heard, which we've reiterated many times, is that residents want to see more support for the local agricultural and agricultural economy. The agricultural economy is one of the main industries of the County of Brant, and not only agricultural, but the supporting uses. The growth plan really lays out a very good framework in terms of enhancing the agri-food network, which also includes transportation and the availability to get goods to market, whether that be small farm stands or actually shipping goods down to the Ontario Food Terminal. It's to be able to allow that transportation network to enhance that. Also farm vehicles, we have to share the road, not just with bikes, but with farm vehicles, and that's part of the plan moving forward. We also have issues with land use compatibility. Residential homes with industrial, but also in terms of farm uses and residential as well, which is the minimum separation distance. So we've enhanced that as well. But also we're trying to have some flexible policies to allow and respond to the needs of local farmers. for on-farm diversification and enhancing their businesses as they move forward with higher production and also more technology that's coming to farms, which is very important. Slide. So how we green, which is a little bit different than protecting our natural system, really that's about in terms of floodplain protection, flooding and erosion hazards. Paris is in the middle of a floodplain, part of the downtown, but also how we green. And if you're listening to the federal election, all these themes also very much align to what's going on with the federal election in terms of climate change, housing affordability, the economy, agriculture. So we've actually really enhanced some of these policies to just make it very clear moving forward in terms of creating sustainable and green communities. We have a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2050, which is also a Canadian mandate as well. How we're going to do that in terms of our energy uses, our building materials, how we create things, solar panels, wastewater, gray water. Part of that is our climate change strategy moving forward. And also developing connected public open spaces, the urban canopy, heat islands. All of this is part of a How We Green initiative for the county. And this was very important to people also in terms of why doesn't the county have a green bin? Your own household waste, what happens to it, and waste management, recycling. Those issues have come up as well, and those are very important to the community members, how we're going to deal with that moving forward. Another big thing is I talked about the Grand River, watershed planning, and also protecting water resources, which is all integrated into the How We Green framework. Slide. So we have another question. Again, we said climate change, it's very important. There was actually a news article today saying that 75% of youth say climate change is one of their #1 fears and issues that are impacting them today, which is interesting to read. So the county has committed to being carbon neutral by 2050. How do you think the county should best achieve this? So there's a few things there. Develop a climate change action strategy, enhance waste reduction, composting, and recycling initiatives, require development to follow sustainability guidelines, grow the county's tree canopy by 30%, which is a minimum of how much habitat is enough, implement an urban tree bylaw for individual trees in our urban areas in Paris and St. George, or all of the above. So I'll let you take a minute to decide what you think. Well, that's good. All of you thought some of them were very important, but all of the above, and that is actually what we are doing, all of the above. But definitely a climate change action strategy will outline those things moving forward. So thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate it. So I will be turning it over to Jessica, who will talk about complete communities and housing and affordability. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. So one of the other major topics that we focused on through the new official plan and that we had a ton of community involvement on and feedback on was housing. So during phases 1 through 3 of this project, it really helped to create the policies under Section 5 of the new official plan. Like I mentioned, we just got a ton of feedback about inclusion of attainable housing options, a range of further options and mixes in different areas throughout the county. Affordability was a huge topic as well. So affordable housing, which targets moderate to lower incomes, making sure that we provide housing for all of our community residents going forward and looking to the future. And also aging in place was a very, very big topic of discussion as well. So ensuring that residents like myself that have grown up here throughout their entire lives can remain in the county, continue to live within their communities, and continue to have housing options that meet their needs. So through section 5, when you get a chance to review it, if you haven't already, you'll see that there's definitely some more flexible housing policies applied than what we currently have within our official plan. What we've mainly done is start to remove terminologies that tend to be a bit limiting or a little restrictive, things such as single detached home, townhouse, row house, etc. These terminologies tend to be very specific. So our approach has been mainly to provide for housing opportunities throughout different communities, mainly based on our density targets, intensification, as well as servicing, and meeting different, of course, community needs depending on where the community is located, how the community is designed, what might best suit that community going forward in the future. So if we're seeing potential for redevelopment of a community, what could that potentially look like in terms of housing? The housing policies within the new official plan also address housing, as I mentioned, throughout the primary, secondary, and also the rural communities of the county. So we wanted to focus not just on the urban areas of the county, but also ensure that we capture all of our small rural communities and clustered areas. It's important that when we address housing, we do it throughout the entire county of Brant, not just within the urban areas. So as I mentioned, community feedback also help create policies which encourage affordable housing. So this really comes down to ensuring that, as I mentioned, we have housing to address all resident needs going forward in the future. We are working very closely with the City of Brantford on this, as well as a joint shared servicing provider. But we do need to make sure that we look specifically at what our community needs are, as well as the County of Brant, and make sure that we're determining exactly where housing should be provided. And if it is directed very specifically at certain folks, then where should that housing be accommodated? Close to transit, close to community amenities, close to where people gather. Different community needs like aging in place have specific reliancies as well. So we're working with our community services folks who just undertook the age-friendly community plan to ensure that we're complementing all of those policies back into the new official plan. So the policies of Section 5 relate back to many other different topics as well, some that we've already touched on, like planning for infrastructure, protecting what we value, also transportation and mobility, as I mentioned. It also will relate to Section 11, which is the county toolbox. And the county toolbox really, we're going to touch on it in a couple of slides, but it really gives opportunities to create incentives for different types of housing as well. So whether that be affordable housing or demographic specific housing. So again, looking at aging in place. So there's definite opportunities that we can create different tools down the road to assist us with actually creating that, looking at community specific initiatives as well to ensure that everything fits and everything is well designed. Next slide. So we're going to take a poll quite quickly here with you, and it is our last poll of the evening, and it is with housing in mind. So we would like to know from all of our Zoom participants, what is the most preferred way of addressing the municipal housing issue? So there are a few options on your screen, and we do recognize that while we say municipal housing issue, that the issue of housing is a lot larger than just the County of Brant. It does extend nationally and also globally. So there's many different discussions surrounding housing. We don't want to discount that. But for this evening, we'd like to hear what your thoughts are on our municipal issues specific to Brant. So the options are rent to own housing, co-housing model, more medium density housing forms like stacked townhouses or back-to-back towns, nonprofit housing partnership models, more high density housing options like apartment dwellings, or all of the above. And we'll just give a few more seconds here for everyone to complete the poll. Again, thank you for your participation this evening. We really do appreciate it. And we like doing these interactive polls because it gives us somewhat of a sense of the community's feelings on our already draft official plan. So we really appreciate that. Thank you. Perfect. So I'm seeing all of the above at 11 participants chose that one. So that works out to around 61%, which is great. As Jem mentioned, for some of the other initiatives like How We Green, we are using all of these different types of models within our new draft official plan. Again, really capitalizing on the flexible policies for housing going forward. Thank you for participating there. Next slide, please. So economic development also forms a large topic for the new official plan. It really focuses on the different elements of what exactly makes the county's economy diverse. So it also takes a look at meeting the expectations of the economic development strategy and action plan, ensuring the local economy will provide meaningful employment opportunities for residents both now and in the future, and what that specifically looks like, identifying different opportunities in the future that may not necessarily be the predominant provider at this particular time, but could be influencers in the future as well. And the policies of this section under section 10 consider the county's diverse economy, as well as, again, growth and innovation in the future years to come. Ensuring a strong local economy includes protection and enhancement of our downtown cores. We know that these are very important for our communities. We have many different communities throughout the county of Brant, and each downtown core is unique. Sufficient supply of employment lands to meet the county's needs is also a huge focus of economic development and prosperity through the new official plan. And you heard Jen touch on that as well tonight when she talked about employment lands and developing a strategic employment land reserve. Also minimizing potential land use conflicts. So this is also a huge topic as well. So most people think about minimizing conflicts between either employment and residential, or employment and other sensitive land uses. Jen also mentioned agriculture and residential. Sometimes it actually comes down to making sure that employment uses are also compatible against one another, and ensuring that we have enough diversity within our employment lands to accommodate all different uses into the future. Next slide. And so this takes me to a great point to discuss tourism. So tourism in the county is just one of the many key diverse points of the county's economic base. The policies in section 10 work to encourage, promote, and strengthen tourism opportunities throughout the county of Brant in the coming years. So we already know, and there's some figures there on your screen that were taken from 2019 prior to the pandemic. But we already know that tourism is a strong economic influencer throughout the county of Brant. And so ways to look at how to support this, promote this, look at different opportunities in the future that we may not be seeing now, but we know might become popular. These are all items that were considered through the development of these policies. And we also worked really closely with our economic development, tourism, and strategic initiative folks as well to develop these policies, to make sure that we were considering all of the different and diverse options out there. As Jem mentioned as well, the agritourism plays a huge part in the county's tourism base as far as economy goes. And so we're going to continue to probably see that develop into the future. And we've already taken steps to include different policies into the current official plan, as well as zoning bylaw, that touch on farm diversified uses, as well as agricultural related uses, to assist in developing businesses within these areas that are unique, supportive of agriculture, and allow for generational farming to continue to really basically capitalize on the area that they continue to live in, to capitalize on what's unique to their farm specifically, and showcase that for visitors to the county, as well as those who continue to live here. Next slide. And so with that, we have already received some feedback through phase 4 of the draft new official plan being released. Some of this has to do with the zoning of properties and whether the zoning has changed, or finding information relating to the zoning of specific properties on the draft schedules of the new official plan that have been released. So the short answer is this information cannot be found within the official plan or on the draft schedules that have been released. And that's mainly because it's found, of course, within the County of Brant zoning bylaw. So the draft new official plan is really the top tier land use planning document for the County of Brant, and will look to implement, as Jennifer mentioned, provincial policies such as a place to grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the provincial policy statement. Whereas the zoning bylaw, which will come after the new official plan project, it really looks to implement all of the high level planning and land use policies that we've created in the new official plan and give it some more detail. So specifically things relating to setbacks, height limitations, permitted uses, prohibited uses, all of those types of details will be downloaded into a new comprehensive zoning bylaw for the County of Brant. So once we wrap up the new official plan project and hopefully get the province's approval in 2022, we'll begin to undertake the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, which will again implement all of these new policies that we've worked hard to create. And then the zoning bylaw will provide all of those details for further review and further consideration of land development, or how things take shape, whether it be for residential, commercial, employment. And so working towards a new comprehensive bylaw, we'll be undertaking that project, as I mentioned, directly following this project for the new official plan. We'll be looking to initiate the new comprehensive zoning bylaw project in early 2022. And it will have its own completely separate process. It will be a public process, and it will also have its own separate engagement sessions. Next slide. And so the new official plan and a potentially new comprehensive zoning bylaw in the future are just really two tools that can be used to manage both growth and development throughout the county. There are many other tools that we can use to assist in managing growth and development, as well as to implement a lot of the initiatives that we're creating through the draft new official plan and that we've touched on this evening, such as How We Green or Protecting What We Value, such as community improvement plans, heritage conservation districts, signs, site plan control, demolition, and site alteration bylaws are all examples of different tools that we can use as well. And the policies throughout the new draft official plan, some of which the team have touched on this evening, and specifically in a section 11 of the draft new official plan, provide direction for the creation of these tools. So that's where we'll draw upon in the future when we look to undertake all of these implementation initiatives. And creation and implementation of these tools will be our policy team's primary focus looking towards the future after the draft new official plan has been approved. So most likely in the early beginnings of 2022. Next slide. And so I will hand it back to Glenn now for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers for the very informative presentation. And of course, thank you to all of you for participating in tonight's session, both for your interest in the topic and for the questions that have already been provided. I promised I would give you periodic updates. We're still hovering around 30 to 35 attendees in the Zoom meeting. And again, I know there are more than that who are also watching through the live stream on Facebook. So for those of you who may have joined us in progress, just a reminder, first of all, that you've been listening to County of Brant planning staff as they've taken us through the core information. And please remember that your two ways to share questions this evening are through the written Zoom Q&A function or by sending them by email to officialplan@brant.ca. Again, we have moderators who are looking at both of those channels and looking to consolidate questions. And let's move to those questions now. Again, as they've been submitted, our moderators have been looking at them. They've been looking for questions that are similar in nature with a view to addressing duplication. In some cases, they've been consolidating multiple questions into a single one. So please don't worry if the question posed this evening isn't exactly as you may have asked it. And again, there may not be time to address all of the questions, but staff will review all of them and they will be documented as input to the initiative. So let's get right to the questions, including some that were sent in advance. And Jessica, I think I'm going to bring you back here. I think this one best goes to you. Someone had noted that, in their words, I have been following the new official plan project and reviewing the draft mapping that was released. Just wondering, as I didn't see it reflected on the draft mapping, how will the new official plan impact the zoning of my property? And I guess that depends on where their property is, but conceptually, go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks, Glenn. So that's a great question. And actually, it's really fitting for where I think we just left off and came from. So as far as how potentially the draft new official plan could impact zoning would be through once we develop the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And again, that project is coming following directly right after the draft new official plan wraps up. We're going to look to start initiating that project in early 2022. But it will take a look at implementing any policies within the new official plan and downloading that detail into a more comprehensive approach through mapping that will show exactly what lands will be zoned. They will reflect much of what we've already developed in the official plan. So residents can expect that, for instance, if there's encouragement for different housing typologies in specific areas, that will be a predominant focus. Complete communities, so incorporating more different supportive community type uses into areas could be something that they might look for. If you're in the agricultural areas, there may be more protections in place to help the farming community out as well. So it will really just depend on the area that they are located in.
Great, thanks, Jessica. Let me invite Brandon to jump back in here. Brandon, there are a couple of questions about severing lands, and I'm going to ask you both of them, and maybe you can provide an answer that speaks to both. So bear with me. The first question is, my property is currently designated as a rural residential and will be rural lands within the new official plan. Will there still be an opportunity to sever the lands and possibly create a lot or two if all the requirements can be met? And they go on to ask, what about things like a larger garage or accessory structures? Now, the related question that's also come in, somebody has said, I currently own lands that are designated rural residential, so a similar situation. Why has this designation and my ability to sever been taken away? So has it been taken away? So please speak to both of those, Brandon.
Sure, thanks, Glenn. So I'll start with the first question. Actually, you know what, I'll address the change in the designation first. I think that's probably the best place to start. So the change in the designation is coming first and foremost from the provincial framework. So there isn't a such thing as a rural residential within the provincial framework anymore. The province really is pushing us to direct our development to settlement areas. And that's something we've heard over and over from residents as well. So one of the big things that comes up with some of the rural residential properties is where do we draw the line? Where does it stop? So those designations exist in the official plan as it is. There are some permissions for severances. Within the new designation framework, that will not be permitted. So if you are in a settlement area, you will be permitted severances. When you are located outside of the settlement areas, there will only be provisions for kind of technical changes. So lot line adjustments for very minor reasons, technical reasons, encroachments, for kind of natural heritage systems, the hazards and those types of things, to consolidate them onto single properties. But the long story short is that the development really is being directed to our settlement areas. So that rural lands designation goes hand in hand with our prime agricultural designation. And there really is a protection for the prime agricultural areas. So because those rural lands are located in prime ag areas, the priority goes to the prime agriculture.
And what about that question, Brandon, relating to garages or other accessory structures?
Yep. Yeah, so the permissions won't change with permitted uses that way. It's just the development permissions. So if you have a house on your property, you would obviously be, as long as it's permitted under the zoning bylaw, and that stuff will all be taken into account with the new zoning bylaw project. But understanding that the house is a permitted use on your property, you'd be permitted accessory structures like a larger garage, a swimming pool, stuff that would be accessory to your house.
Brandon, this next one might best go to you as well, though Jennifer might want to jump in because, again, there's a couple of related questions. The first one is, do any of the new policies within the new OP specifically affect downtown Paris? So that's one question. And the related one, and maybe Jennifer's better for the second, is why have none of the changes in Paris relieved the road congestion? And that's probably getting a little ahead of what's in the official plan, but if Jennifer would like to respond. But Brandon, kick us off on the first one. Are there any policies in the new OP specifically affecting downtown Paris?
Perfect. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Glenn, the OP is much larger of a scope. It's a broader policy document. So it doesn't really zoom in that far to address things like traffic congestion, very specific things, say, to downtown Paris. But there will be impacts to those areas. For example, we're looking at creating the design, the comprehensive design manual eventually. That's noted in our official plan. That would likely have an impact on places like downtown Paris or Burford or some of our settlements. And our transportation master plan is also mentioned in our official plan. So you'll start to see those specific impacts with the master planning that kind of comes after the official plan. But the broader impacts, the broader policy framework won't kind of directly speak to those locations at this point.
Thank you. Jennifer, anything to add?
Thanks, Glenn. And I've seen the question that it says, why have none of the changes in Paris relieved the road congestion? In terms of the official plan itself, I think that question's getting ahead of the OP, whoever asked that. Like current changes that, if you're talking about what happened downtown Paris, as I point out of my office to the light at the corner there right now. So the OP outlines the corresponding work that's going on with the Transportation Master Plan. The Transportation Master Plan is coming forward this fall. And those are the specific things that's looking at traffic demand management, commuting patterns, road networks, projects that will be coming to alleviate congestion and parking issues. And also, as we talked about, the corresponding things that work with the OP in terms of getting goods to market, how residents get along, parking in subdivisions, how we design our subdivisions. So that's how we correspond. But if the question is specifically about the current changes that are going on, like the changes at the crosswalk at the corner, they removed some parking on Grand River Street North at the corner to alleviate traffic flow. Then also they put in speed humps instead of the crosswalks. Those things are actually mitigation measures for pedestrians during tourist season and various things, but there's different projects that are going to be coming forward in terms of traffic demand management. So I think the question is a little different, and that's an operations question, but in terms of the OP, we're trying to correspond everything together. So hope that helps.
Okay, so Jennifer, before you turn your camera off, a couple of questions relating to servicing and water supply. So someone is asking, will servicing be extended to Mount Pleasant? And someone else has asked, how will population growth impact water supply? And they go on to note that many people are on well water. So are those being addressed in the OP?
Okay, I've asked Matt Vaughn, our Director of Development Planning. He can talk to the Mount Pleasant issue because we've had a lot of questions about Mount Pleasant in terms of its servicing capacity and water allocation. So if Matt is available to come on to address that question.
I am.
All right.
I am sure. Yeah, there has been quite a bit of discussion around servicing and in and around Mount Pleasant. So currently development in Mount Pleasant is on hold until Brantford commences its supply of water to the Tutula Heights area.
Matt,
So,
Matt, Glenn, just sorry to interrupt. Do you have something over your camera? We actually can't see you. You're sort of blurred out.
sorry, there we go.
There we go. Great. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Brantford has indicated that they do have it in their schedule to carry out this work, and that the supply of water to that subdivision will be within the 5-year horizon. But for the time being, we're not making any commitments on moving forward with any large developments in the Mount Pleasant area right now. Just looking at some minor rounding out. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. And Jennifer, did you have anything to add about water or servicing?
Well, the operations folks aren't on tonight, but I can generally talk about servicing allocation. So the county's undertaking various class environmental assessments to deal with water and wastewater issues in the county, mostly in our settlement areas. So the Paris Master Servicing Plan and an allocation strategy and phasing of development to allow water and wastewater capacity, that's being undertaken, including Burford Water and Wastewater Class Master Servicing Plan is ongoing, Canesville as well, and also St. George. That's underway and it's almost completed in terms of wastewater and water Class C8. It's at the province for review. So all that will deal with the allocation. Like for instance, in St. George, the plan is to drill a new well and to also deal with the sanitary outflow and really the attenuation issue to Whiteman's Creek. So the other issue is then outside of those serviced municipal drinking water areas and serviced municipal sewage and sanitary, really we have our rural lands and you're on private, obviously drinking water wells and septic systems. And then outside of those settlement areas, you know, even our smaller ones like Mount Pleasant, like Matt just addressed, there is no plans to service those with municipal drinking water or wastewater. It's still private wells. But the policies of the plan is really about protecting water resources. And if someone comes in for a severance, they have to ensure that they have potable water, potable raw drinking water that's available to service that lot, that it's also clean and or it could be treated. So those are some of the things in terms of hydrogeological assessments, terrain analysis, to ensure those things are done in terms of allowing a house to have a private well drilled. So I think that.
Thanks, Jennifer. So Jessica, a straightforward process question for you. Earlier, we said that we were not this evening getting into specific property or site-specific questions, but someone is asking if they do have site-specific or property-specific questions, you know, regarding designations and so forth. Should they be submitted to that email address, officialplan@brant.ca? Is that the best place for people to send them? Again, you're not going to address them this evening, but you could get back to people post-session.
Absolutely. Thanks, Glenn. So that's a great question. So we have been accepting site-specific requests, formal requests that were made through the official plan process to either look at possibly accommodating something different on a property, whether it be use or designation, or, you know, to possibly expand a settlement area boundary through the new official plan process. That has actually closed. We stopped taking formal requests. The deadline was April 30th of 2021 of this year. So we've actually stopped taking those sorts of requests. And that's just so that we can have the time and ability to comprehensively review each request and respond back as part of this process. But yes, any sort of inquiry-based site-specific questions can absolutely be forwarded to the policy team through that email officialplan@brant.ca, and we can definitely assist you with determining, perhaps what the property may be designated in the draft new official plan, finding the policies that directly relate to that, as well as any other questions that you may have about the process or how best to get involved or next steps.
Thank you. So Jessica, a couple more for you while I've got you there. Someone has asked or said the new official plan does not include any required setbacks or land use regulations, or at least it doesn't appear to them. Where can I find these details for properties throughout the county? So where can they go to find that information?
Sure. So again, that kind of relates, I think, back to what we were chatting about towards the end of the presentation and to kind of the first question there that was asked, but still a great question. And I do understand as a landowner wanting that information, looking for those details. It can be a little frustrating from time to time, depending on the municipality that you're in. Everybody kind of does it differently. But here in Brant, you can refer to the zoning bylaw, the comprehensive zoning bylaw. We'll have all of those details. We can definitely assist you in locating that document. It is posted on our website. And as I mentioned, we will look to undertake a new comprehensive zoning bylaw towards the end of this project when we wrap up the new official plan, beginning in early 2022. And it'll take us a little bit to create it, but we will get there. And again, it is a public process. So I know some of these questions relate to how the new draft official plan may affect individuals' properties. Those are great questions. Do keep them in mind, engage with us on the new draft official plan so that there's a better understanding of what the designation actually means or entails. And then continue to engage with us when we do undertake that new comprehensive zoning bylaw as well. It's extremely important to really understand how the process works, to become involved, to really have an appreciation of where the policies come from and what they might mean for any property owner within the county of Brant. Doesn't matter if you're a property owner of a residential property, an employment property, or commercial property. It's important to know exactly what the changes might look like and exactly how those policies are all working together, and perhaps with other projects as well that are being undertaken corporately.
So Jessica, just briefly, somebody is asking, will there be further changes made to the draft new OP before council adopts the plan, perhaps in December? You don't have to get into what the changes are, but will there be any changes?
So that's a wonderful question. And as tonight implies, with our continued engagement, we're still continuing to engage with the community, stakeholders, and our Indigenous communities as well as we continue to move forward with this project. That will continue into and throughout the fall. And we will take into consideration all feedback, ideas, and comments received. So there will most definitely be some changes made to the draft official plan text, as well as the draft schedules that we've released throughout phase 4. And not to mention also the 90-day one window review that we're currently involved in with the province, as they review our draft document to make sure that we're on par with all of those provincial legislation and policies. So I'm sure that they will also have their own set of feedback and suggested changes to be made as well. So yes, there will be still some changes and tweaks to be made as we move forward.
Thank you. And Jennifer, I don't know if you want to tackle this one, just a very blunt and straightforward question. Why do we need to be carbon neutral? So just right to the point.
Lots of can of worms. Well, part of the county's climate emergency that they passed last year, and our climate change initiative and our strategy moving forward, and also the federal initiatives and also the provincial initiatives, it is coming. No matter what the debate is provincially or federally, the carbon neutrality is coming. And also in terms of vehicles with emissions, the changes that are proposed, the county's made a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2050 as was passed by council, and it's a smart thing because municipalities have to get in that game. And whether it be carbon offsets, carbon trading, carbon emissions reduction, there's an unbelievable amount of ways you can do it. A lot of municipalities are looking at these initiatives, but That's the commitment that we've made as a county, which aligns to the climate change strategy. And so we'll be looking into ways of how the county will do that moving forward.
So Jennifer, a couple of archaeology resource related questions for you. Someone has asked, what does the county's official plan say about archaeology resources, and specifically about the development lands around the 403 in Paris? That's the first question. And the second one is, when development occurs on county-owned lands, will archaeology collections be retained within and stored by the County of Brant? Can you speak to those for us, please?
Okay, thanks, Glenn. So a couple of parts to that question. So the first thing, I'll talk about the 403 expansion lands. So part of our assessment to the province is actually talking to Indigenous communities. So we met with Six Nations and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation about the expansion lands and their concerns. And obviously cultural and heritage and also archaeological resources were of a concern. And we have to identify these, and it was part of our submission to the province. And part of our engagement with Six Nations of the Grand River and Mississaugas of the Credit was also in terms of determining an archaeological management plan, a strategy, and also early engagement on sites moving forward. They're obviously very concerned about cultural resources and preserving. So they're, the number one priority in terms of that. And in terms of, I guess, the actual how the assessments are done, it's really early engagement with them. And an actual protocol that we're developing. Also following like the provincial criteria, there's actually archaeological management plan guidelines that we are to follow and things like that. And in terms of actual any artifacts that are found, really it becomes a question of what they want to do with them. There's obviously a storage issue, and it would be up to our engagement with Six Nations and Mississaugas as to, if we found some cultural resources, what they would like to do. So it's not really an ownership issue if we will store them. It would be about, sometimes they just want them left on site and identified that they're there. So we're working towards getting a protocol with them to make sure that we have the preservation involved.
So Jennifer, one more for you, and then I'm going to go back to Brandon, give you a little bit of a rest. But someone is asking, has the county already received enough residential applications? So I take that to mean applications for residential housing to hit the provincial target that's been established for 2051. And if it has, can you now stop any new applications that may be coming into the pipeline?
Well, that's a very good question, and I assume it does mean residential growth, because just to also sort of reiterate the fact that the growth does not just mean residential growth or housing. It's also the other side, which is employment and jobs. The two go hand in hand, and they can't be sort of changed or cherry picked. It goes together. And the jobs and the residents also is a growth forecast. So just to clear that up as well. But I assume obviously it means residential growth. And if you mean applications, there's different facets to application. There's either no application received at all. There's an application received in process. There's a draft plan of subdivision that they've received, or there's a registered subdivision. So there's all different phases of where they're at in the process. So I would assume the question meant new subdivision applications that have no status at all is probably the question. And we do, as we've mentioned, we do have a lot of the registered subdivisions in the next 10 years that are allocated for growth, depending on the servicing. Really what it comes down to is the growth plan got amended a year and a half ago to 2041 to 2051. And that's the gap where we don't have and we're missing, but we have the actual population forecast to the 59,000 to 2051. And as I mentioned previously in the presentation, we have these excess lands. So those are the lands around Paris. There's 3 major parcels that don't have any applications that are declared surplus and excess. and they are not to have applications received on them, or they're not to be developed into the plan horizon. So I think that it's a very complicated process of where they're at, and then the receiving of them in the process. So hope that clears that up.
Thank you, Jennifer. So everybody, we're up to about 8:40. We were originally looking to wrap things up by about 8:45, but there are still a good number of questions. And again, I'm not promising we'll get to all of them, but I'm going to just make an executive decision to go a little bit longer, maybe up until 9 o'clock or so. Again, we want to be respectful of your time and not keep you too late. But Brandon, I want to bring you back in because there are some more questions about agriculture and severances. So a couple of things here. One person has said, I've heard rumors through the release of the new official plan that severances will no longer be permitted within agricultural areas of the county. And they're wondering, is that true? And then secondly, what about lot line adjustments? And then going beyond that, some people have asked, what options will there be for generational farms to accommodate family close by or on the farm if severances are not permissible? So can you speak to those for us, please?
I can. Yes, great questions. So with respect to severances, like I said, they won't be permitted outside of settlement areas. So rural lands and agricultural lands, it won't apply to them. Severances won't be an option. Lot line adjustments, that's still something that we are working with the province and engaging on a little bit as well. Like I said, there are permissions for technical lot line adjustments, but anything beyond that, that kind of slides into an increased size of development wouldn't be permitted in the agricultural areas. With respect to generational farming, severances haven't been permitted in agricultural areas in the province of Ontario for a while now. They also got rid of the options for, I believe it was called the retirement lot. That was done, I think, a decade or so ago already. And that really was one of the things that I've heard the farming community wishes that was an option. We recently, about a year ago, put in place some policies for additional residential units. And we did extend those into our agricultural and rural areas. So what that means is that if there is a house on the property and the property permits a house, as long as it's a certain size and to accommodate the septic and well requirements, they'd be able to establish another house on the property. So whether that be a unit within the existing house or an in-law suite attached or just a bit further off, those permissions have been extended to the agricultural areas. And we are kind of having ongoing discussions and engagement based on that program. As well, there are permissions in our zoning currently for farm labor housing. So housing units that allow for the fluctuation of farm labor or workers that may need to live on the farm during certain periods of the year and then travel around or go somewhere else for different times of the year. So there are some flexible permissions, and we are looking at enhancing those. But as for straight up severances in the agricultural areas, those won't be permitted based on the direction of the draft official plan.
Thanks, Brendan. So I'm going to invite you and or any of your colleagues to jump in on this next one. Somebody has said early in the presentation, a presenter mentioned preserving small town charm. Given that growth is unstoppable, can you provide more details on how the county will preserve the feel of our towns? So Brandon and or others jump in. How do you propose through the OP to preserve some of that small town feel and charm?
Great question. So like I've said a few times, the official plan really is a broad guidebook. One of the major things we've heard during our engagement is that desire for the slowed growth, more engagement within the design process for any growth that we see, and really embracing the identity of the county of Brant. We live in a great municipality. It's beautiful. It's got beautiful spots, both urban and rural. And developing some tools out of this official plan will definitely help with that. So things like the urban design guidelines or our comprehensive design guidelines manual, working with design guidelines for things like public space, our downtowns, heritage buildings, even extending them into our more rural areas to kind of develop in collaboration with the residents. There'll be engagement, obviously, for creating those tools, but having some more input from residents in that process, as well as the general process for development applications as it is. We have seen a desire for more engagement and more kind of public engagement in those processes as well. So the official plan really will set that standard. So that moving forward with any kind of development that way, there will really be that public input and that public voice, and we really will get that small town charm, that identity as the residents get involved and tell us what they would like to see.
So I'll ask respectfully of our responders, if you could all go into kind of rapid response mode, because we're into our last 10, 15 minutes, and I'd like to shoehorn in as many questions as possible. So the more concisely you can respond, the better. Jennifer, did you have something to add in response to that?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I'll just add in terms of small town charm. I mean, the concept came up during our strategic initiatives in terms of, friendly and quaint and delightful. And people come here and go, oh, this is so nice, especially in Paris. But really, it's about preservation of our cultural heritage, our design, especially in Paris and St. George and their smaller towns, to maintain that quaint country feel. And I think what's come up in terms of consultation is the stark difference between the newer subdivisions and the older areas, and it's just such a stark contrast. And to try to actually integrate the design so it actually has some older characteristics and gateway features to enhance that. So there's a lot of things that we could do in terms of that, because when you think about why people like Paris or St. George or other rural communities go out in the country, why do people think the county's a wonderful place? The Grand River, as I said, the protection of our heritage river, enhancing our design aspects. So it's all different things. But one of the other big things is when you think about, it's so different than urban areas. It's like, well, there's no big box. You got different shops and, quaint restaurants and neat things, and people like it that way. And it's not just this, plain old big box mentality. We do need those services, but it's just the preservation of that feel, and to make that and enhance that and keep it really is the point. So just wanted to throw that in. So
thanks, Jennifer. So Jessica, let me go back to you. And again, everybody, be as concise as possible. Jessica, somebody's saying, in looking at the new mapping, it appears, at least to them, as though commercial designations have been removed from rural cluster areas. And first of all, if you can let us know if that's the case, but they're going on to say, will the new quote rural lands designation allow for commercial uses? And if so, what types of uses will be permitted?
Sure, absolutely. So thanks, Glenn, and great question to whomever out there asked it. So yes, as I think it was Brandon touched on this evening during the presentation, some of the land use designations have been either consolidated, or you may not see them in appearance as they would through the current official plan any longer through the new draft official plan. That's mainly because the policies, some of them have been combined in places where they could be. Policies have gotten more flexible in some instances. So within particular the rural communities and the hamlets and villages and the rural clusters, what we've done is we've taken a supportive commercial approach. So instead of putting a blanket designation that's very specific, and in some instances could be limiting onto particular properties, what we've done is we've taken the approach that supportive commercial or supportive employment uses could potentially be located in these areas if they directly support the community of which they're located within. And in some instances that could relate back to agriculture as well, and the agricultural surrounding landscapes and uses directly within the area. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Jessica. Let me get Brandon back in because there's another question about agriculture as well. So Brandon, someone has asked, if you have a house on agricultural land and want to increase housing on the farmland to assist with farming without decreasing available land being farmed, will that be allowed? And they've gone on to say specifically, due to increasing labor-intensive farming techniques to grow more diverse food for local consumption. So will that be permitted?
Thanks, Glenn. The short answer, I guess, is yes. The logistics of that will come into play with the zoning bylaw. But really what we want to do, and as they've noted in their question, is if there is small scale development like that, like a little extra house or two on those lands, we really don't want to be taking our good farmland out of production. So there will be that flexibility likely within our new zoning bylaw, or at least it will be determined by the new zoning bylaw. And we'll be chatting with our farm community about that specifically as well when that new project comes up.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the brevity. So let's get Jennifer back in. I think it was Jennifer during the presentation who talked about the tree canopy targets. And somebody is wondering, is there any tree planting target in the official plan to achieve and maintain that tree canopy? And they've also said, would there be any plan to plant male and female species of trees to balance the pollen? I don't, that's pretty detailed, but go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, as mentioned, part of the official plan in terms of the targets of tree canopy, which is outlined in how much habitat is enough. And in terms of mostly municipal targets for tree canopy across the county, it's about 30%. Most municipalities aim for that target. That includes urban and rural trees and our woodlots. So we are under that, and it's made note that we do have obviously work to do and programs to plant additional trees. And some of that, if you've been following along, Michelle has done a lot of work in the tree conservation bylaw passed in June. And that's sort of part and parcel. There's a lot of recommendations and discussion about that. And the county is working with community services and Kathy Ballantyne's group in terms of forestry management. We have a landscape architect as well. So the question in terms of what's to plant, if you're talking about large parcels of land that are being replanted, obviously, you know, we look at various native species, not ornamental. And then also our landscape architect and through Michelle and also with forestry and arborists to balance the pollen. Obviously, like bees and bee city initiatives are very important as well. They're part of our wildlife strategy. So, so all that is taken into consideration. It's a great question. So thanks very much.
So a couple of housing related questions. Jessica, maybe you can pop back in again. And we're down to our last 7 minutes. So again, be super concise here. It's very straightforward. First question, will the new official plan allow for tiny homes to be established within the county?
So the most concise way to answer that wonderful question about housing is yes, the draft new official plan does give consideration to tiny homes. It gives consideration back to staff to investigate and do some more research on where specifically tiny homes might be implemented throughout the county of Brant. If so, how, those sorts of things to really determine, okay, if we go the route of tiny homes, where best might they be located in terms of servicing and proximity to other communities.
Okay, and the second related question, or about housing anyway, someone has said, specific to affordable and attainable housing and the partnership with Brantford, what new steps are being taken so that the next 10 years deliver more affordable and attainable homes than we've seen in the last 10 years? And again, that's a little specific for an OP, but do you have any quick thoughts, Jessica?
Sure, absolutely. So in working with the city of Brantford, actually a new development is the housing task force. And it's a specific group of individuals that have been basically chosen to work on a functioning working team to accomplish all of the wonderful initiatives that have been identified through plans like the Joint Mayors Housing Task Force Initiative, the Brantford Brant Housing Stability Plan, as well as the other housing plans that have been created with the City of Brantford as partnership. And we have identified targets within those plans to be created either by jointly by the municipalities, both the City of Brantford and the County of Brant, and then also through different providers, either private, non-for-profit. So there have actually been targets developed that we are actively working towards, and we're tracking those developments, and they're being updated through plans as well as through council reports going forward. So please do check both the City of Brantford as well as the County of Brant council meetings. There will be information as those developments continue to evolve throughout the years.
Okay, and Jessica, a very straightforward question. People are interested in knowing whether the presentation that was delivered earlier will be made available to people, and if so, how? Will it be on a website? How can they access it?
Sure, absolutely. We can work towards making the presentation available this evening. We can most likely post it on Engage Brant would probably be the best solution, or on the project landing page on our website at brant.ca/new official plan. We can get that to folks. That's not a problem.
Great, thank you. So we'll wrap up shortly, everyone. But just before I invite Jessica to describe next steps and ongoing opportunities for engagement, I want to thank all of you again for participating, and a special thank you to those of you who shared questions and comments. We didn't quite get to all of them, but we got to quite a few, and that's good news, I think, for everyone. I'd also like to thank all of our esteemed elected officials for joining us this evening. Both for their interest in the official plan, which is vitally important to the county, of course, but also for their ongoing valued service to the community, which is greatly appreciated. From my perspective, it's been a real pleasure facilitating the session and working with what is obviously such a very thoughtful, knowledgeable, and articulate group. There were, again, some very good and on-point questions, so thank you for those. I'll be back in a moment to formally draw things to a close, but first over to Jessica to really quickly talk about next steps, where things go from here, including opportunities to be further engaged in the process. Jessica?
Thanks, Glenn. So as we mentioned earlier this evening, currently we are in phase 4 of the new official plan project. With the 90-day provincial review underway, we will continue to consult and engage throughout the fall, leading up to the beginning of November. And we will be busy making any amendments and changes necessary and appropriate to the draft official plan and schedules throughout November and December, bringing finalized documents back to council for adoption in January 2022. So that's exciting for the new year. And submissions to the province will then follow with a new official plan, hopefully approved for July 1st, 2022. Next slide. And so there is still plenty of time, as we've mentioned, to engage with our policy team on this project. It's very important. We need your feedback. We need to get this right in order to build a really great product for our community. So we do hope that you continue to engage with us and stay up to date and provide feedback. And we have tried to make it as easy as possible, even considering the ongoing pandemic. So as far as reaching out to us, you can do so through engagebrant.ca/the new official plan. You can also sign up for project emails and updates through brant.ca/planning projects. You can stay tuned to brant.ca/new official plan. That's our project landing page, and we post all documents on there for review and access. You can also follow us on Facebook at Brant Planning. You can give us a call at 519-44-BRANT, or you can send an email, as we've mentioned, to officialplan@brant.ca, and that comes directly to our team. And we'd also like to take a couple minutes just to highlight that you can expect to receive, any residents of the county watching this evening can expect to receive a mail out with a short survey attached in their mailbox if you haven't already. And we tried to make the survey short because we know that folks are very busy with everything going on and kids going back to school. But if you can take a few minutes and fill that out, it would be greatly appreciated. It can be mailed back to the Burford and Paris customer service offices or scanned in and emailed to officialplan@brant.ca. You can also take part in the survey through engagebrant.ca/new official plan. It's posted, it's ready to go. So you can travel there this evening and actually partake in the survey as well. We would ask that any and all feedback, surveys, or different ideas or comments that you may have just be forwarded to us by October 29th. This is just a date that would allow us to consider all of the feedback, ideas, as well as the survey comments, and hopefully work to incorporate those into the new draft official plan and schedules where appropriate. And I will turn it back over to Glenn now to take us to the end of this evening.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And yeah, I won't take more than a minute of people's time. Again, thank you for hanging in there with us. And further to what Jessica was just saying about further involvement in the initiative, I do encourage you, if you have the time and if you are so inclined, to please take the opportunity to provide your ongoing perspective on a number of important topics. It's critical that staff have the opportunity to hear from you and to understand your thinking about these important issues. And again, there are multiple opportunities available to you to remain engaged. And please do visit the county's website if you have the chance. And lastly, I'll just say thank you again to all of the various personnel who made this session possible, in particular, the planning staff at the County of Brant, for all of their good and hard work. And thank you again to all of you for your participation. Enjoy what's left in the rest of your evening. I'll now formally adjourn the session. Take care, stay safe, and good night, everyone.